Tell you what, Chris, you got to pick up Kent Masterson's new book.
Thank you.
Okay. Shane. Okay. So what we're going to start with is how did Little Round Top turn into a military objective that day? Because at first it was not. So what led that to become objective?
There's the fact that Little Round Top was technically the center of the Union line, and when Longstreet's boys got up there, they realized there's nobody up there. So, but then as they were coming across, thinking, they thought they were down further was the problem. And they didn't realize, where they actually were on the field. Because the guys who had done the reconnaissance in the morning, didn't, come along to, bring them back up the way they came.
But didn't Hood's division and McCall get tangled up?
Yeah, they were tangled up down there in the Devil's Den area, and as once they started to push through, then they realized that the Round Top, if they could get up there, they could break the Union line technically.
So where were they originally going to as the objective?
They were supposed to be headed for the wing.
Okay.
They were going to try to attack, the wing simultaneously, but then, they got off course.
So, but see, what I'm reading into this is they get into this. This is not a military objective. They get tangled up, and then they start throwing division after division after division, and throwing basically good men after bad to try to take something that they really don't even need.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can learn a very important lesson out of that. That you need to know, have a clear, concise objective of where you're going to before you commit these types of troops to this type of battle. I mean,
well, that's where the guys that did the morning reconnaissance should have gone up there with those troops to guide them to where the objective was, and they didn't.
But remember, by the time they went into the fight, you're talking about anywhere between 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was supposed to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Longstreet's boys were not in position anywhere near, and then when they came across, they realized they were within the within the vision of the Little Round Top, so they tried to go back around. That's where if the guys who did the morning reconnaissance would have been with them, they wouldn't have had that problem.
But I thought Lee sent his own personal reconnaissance out there to look that over.
Yeah, well, whatever he had told them to do, they were way off on. But I will say this, though, if they attack first thing in the morning, just straight through there, Little Round Top's theirs by 10 o'clock. And they split the Union line.
Well, they definitely had the flank, but did I guess did the tangled up, when they got tangled up, how much did that mess them up? I mean, because they got off so bad.
The march and the counter march is what threw things off, and then the counter march where they really got tangled, and by the time the day got unraveled, it was already done for.
Was the counter march even necessary?
No, it wasn't. If they would have just gone straight at the objective, they had it. But the counter march killed them because it gave the 5th, 7th, and 12th Corps time to get up. And the 6th Corps was still another, 5 to 7 hours march away. By the time they marched and counter marched, that 6th Corps was starting to show up. The 5th Corps was there, the 12th Corps was there, and the 6th was starting to come in. The 3rd Corps was already there. It was, they were in deep trouble at that point.
Chris,
if they attack at 8, 9 o'clock, it's done because the 5th wasn't up yet. The 7th, There was only a part of the 12th up, and the 6th Corps was 7 hours march away at that point yet. It did them in.
I mean, I'm still trying to keep, how they got in there, and just kept throwing good men after bad.
And the thing that really screwed him up was where Sickles had his men. That's what threw the whole attack off. Because Sickles was supposed to be back at the Round Tops, not out at the Peach Orchard, and that threw the entire Confederate assault off.
Right.
And that's what caused everything to screw up.
But Sickles moved his men out of the way.
Yeah, he was way out in front. You're talking 500 yards in front of the line.
Yeah, I mean, he had a huge gap there.
Yeah.
It could have really, opened things up. And
he's lucky he didn't cost the Union the battle.
Oh, totally. With that. Another point I make is how too much is, so we're about to say again. So where were they originally headed to? I mean, they were not headed to Little Round Top. Where was they originally headed to?
Out toward the wing, out the orchard, like the Peach Orchard, out in there, because they were supposed to head to the right wing, while McClaw's men were supposed to assault the left side of the line up through Culp's Hill area. But it was not a coordinated assault.
But McClaw's men, wait, that's on the opposite side.
Yeah, it got all screwed up.
Well, wait a second. All right, so you've got Ewell, but McClaw's was part of Longstreet. How was McClaw's being over there with Ewell on the opposite side of the field?
I don't know. Lee had everything all screwed up. Even his battle reports are messed up. Even the best of historians have even been saying, Lee's reports. I went back and watched some of the battle walks and things by Matt Atkinson, who's some of the best, and even he was saying in those that Lee's reports are so because his report says one thing, and his the guys within his command were wrote other things in their books, so it's anyone's guess as to what was supposed to really happen.
Chris, can you hear me?
Is this Tony? Yes, I can hear you, Tony.
I'm not sure who's talking. I have a few questions.
Go ahead.
One, I've always been under the impression, and I cannot remember where exactly I have read this, but I've always been under the impression that the 12th Corps did not arrive until after dark on July the 2nd, which is one of the reasons why they were actually never engaged. The 6th Corps did not arrive until around the same time period. The only corps that was engaged on the flank on July the 2nd was the 5th Corps, and it wasn't even in the entire corps. Vincent's brigade was one of the first brigades to arrive that day, and they were immediately dispersed on Little Round Top, hundreds of yards behind Sickles' position.
Yes, from my understanding, Vincent's brigade, they'd only had a few troops up there, and that was what happened.
A couple hundred.
Yeah, a couple of handful.
Yeah, the strength of the 20th Maine, I want to say, was only about 300 men. I mean, the brigade was not very big.
No, it wasn't.
My other question was, one of the things that I've always been curious to know, and I don't know if there's any way to find out if they're found in the OR reports or not, at some point during the assault, obviously General Hood was seriously wounded. I have to assume that affected the strategic objectives, because he definitely had a reputation as an excellent battlefield commander. So I have to assume that him being wounded at some point, whether it was early on during the battle or not, I don't know. But I have to assume him being wounded affected the conduct of the entire division.
Yeah, he was wounded pretty early on.
If the commander goes down, it's going to have an effect on you. is going to have an effect on your men. When something like that happens.
Let alone the ground was crappy where they were trying to assault too.
And that's why you mentioned the counter march was not necessary. I always thought, and Chris, I want to say you have made posts about this before, that the counter march was due to the fact that Longstreet had been told that certain positions were unoccupied. And when he arrived on the field, he basically was going to, his entire approach was going to be observed by Union artillery, whether it be on the Round Top or somewhere. So he made the decision to change his approach because reports that he had gotten were either hours old or whatever, and by the time he got there, the situation had changed.
The little Round Top had a signal station on top of it.
I'm going off memory. Yeah, he's right. He had an observation station. I'm going off memory now, and sometimes it fails me. Lee sent his own reconnaissance man out that morning to recon the area. Longstreet, now, according to legend, whether it's true or not, Longstreet had got permission from Lee to wait on Law's brigade. Now, I don't know if he really needed that brigade or not, but supposedly he gave him permission. Well, as Longstreet is marching there, and I think Lee went with him part-time, he sees that and he realizes that, they can be seen. So he decides to conduct a 2-hour counter march. Well, this depends on who you want to believe, because, there's so many myths. It takes Longstreet 7 hours to get 2 divisions into position. Now, some people will tell you that, I don't know how long it took Longstreet to get them into position. It shouldn't have taken him 7 hours. It shouldn't have taken him a couple hours. I don't think he had to do the counter march personally.
Longstreet looked at the ground, I think, and he was trying to. Stall, hoping Lee would change his mind with him. On top of the fact that there's a signal station up there that they realized they could be seen from, but I know Longstreet was, absolutely opposed to the assault to begin with.
Well, I mean, it took Longstreet. Now, Shane mentioned something a while ago about when Longstreet got his orders to attack. We've all heard the Jubal Early thing, a sunrise attack. There was not a sunrise attack. Longstreet and Lee met at daybreak. Now, what they talked about, I don't know. I wasn't there. Only one person knows what they was talked about, and he did not discuss that until after Lee was dead. I think that Lee had already made his mind up to attack, and he was getting his final reconnaissance. I'm of the opinion, some people say 9 to 11. I will even go as far as split the difference between, say, 10. I personally think that Lee knew that they would be gaining troops, that Lee gave Longstreet his orders to attack at 9 o'clock. That's my opinion.
What I've never been able to figure out, Chris, is besides what you said about the 7-hour delay, which just does not strike me as a Longstreet move at all. What I've often figured was the situation is this, and if you think about it with the case of human era, Lee and Longstreet, as well as the Army of Northern Virginia as a whole, was notorious for right hook or left hook flanking attacks. That's what they had been doing for 2 solid years, okay? So in this situation, if you look at the battlefield and you look at what Lee thought he was facing, he's thinking if he attacks near the base of what would actually be probably the northern summit of Little Round Top, where the Peach Orchard and the wheat field are, he thinks he's making a right hook flanking attack, which was typical prototype of him, Longstreet, even Jackson when he was alive. That's what they did. So I think possibly what took place there is that they met and were on the same page of a right hook flanking attack. And when he left there and traveled down the Black Tavern, whatever it is, road, and when he arrived and realized we're not making a right hook flanking attack, we're attacking near about the right-hand center of the army, because there are now troops in a location that we did not think that they were.
was an attack, and I think it was General Jackson because this attack was not detected enough. Essentially Ridge was attacked on the second day. The problem is, and I don't know if I can actually put up the map, is when you look at the road map, there is no way for them to come around and launch a attack on the flank.
That's what I think. I think he thought he was attacking the flank. I believe that they didn't think there was anybody on Little Round Top, Big Round Top, anything. And see, I think the movie Gettysburg gives people a false sense of understanding what went on. Okay?
Agreed.
I don't believe for 1 minute that Longstreet was quote unquote insubordinate. I believe he went in there thinking he was going to be making a flanking attack. And when he realized that he wasn't making a flanking attack, that's when I believe couriers were getting sent back and forth. And what he was trying to explain is, we thought we were making a flanking attack, and now we realize that we are not making a flanking attack.
I believe that Longstreet most definitely was borderline insubordinate. I mean, because General Hood comes back and tells him, we must move around to the right. And Longstreet says himself, the commanding general will not allow a flanking movement around those hills. Longstreet was going to hit. The plan for that day, the attack, and me and James was talking about the other day, it was supposed to be an echelon attack, where you an echelon attack, which sounds great on paper and work, but it was not an echelon attack. This was not a traditional flank attack where you were punching into the flank. I mean, he was attacking the edges of the flank, but not a flank attack like where you're pile driving him like Jackson did at Chancellorsville and Gordon and Longstreet at the Wilderness.
So my question is, if we're saying that this was okay, basically put it in a nutshell, I don't think any of us sitting here feel like it's wise militarily to attack a high defended position. So if Lee knew that there were troops on Little Round Top, if Lee knew that he was attacking straight on a position that was of higher elevation and at least adequately defended, that would probably be the worst decision he made in his military career. True or false? Because he's too good of a general for the rest of the war before and since to do that.
But hold up. When the orders were first giving out, there was not a well-defended, troops up there. Now, according to the
neither hill was defended at that point in the morning.
Correct.
Now, according to the late Michael Phillips, who I have a lot of respect for, according to him, and I put a lot of trying to think of what a lot of what respect what he says that they were undefended, and when Longstreet received his orders, the Confederates had a slight numerical advantage, and had the Confederates carried out the attack when ordered, they could have won the battle and rolled up.
They would have. All they had was about 500 men there at that point to defend that area, which was.
But what he's saying is when Lee gave the order, they both had around 50-something thousand men. By the time Longstreet launched his attack, Lee had 50,000 men versus 75,000 for the Federals.
Yeah.
Now, again, that's dependent on. I've heard other people argue and say no, that's not true. I've heard other people say yes, it was. I personally think it was true because Federal troops were still on their way to get to Gettysburg.
Yeah, most of the corps were not up yet.
Right. So had Lee launched the attack or Longstreet launched the attack by 10, they would have had both Round Top and both of the Round Tops with artillery batteries into position, firing enfilade straight into the flanks of the Union armies. And had Ewell launched his attack at Culp's Hill on time, it would have been totally different. But we still got off the target about, Little Round Top being the not being a military objective. So, since it was not, what was the next one too? What was the next one too? The Devil's Den? Was that?
Yeah. Yeah, Devil's Den and then the Round Tops.
Yeah. So the Devil's Den was the original military objective, because that's when Hood came back and said, General, we cannot attack. I'll lose half my division, and they'll still be looking down the hills at us from that rocky hill.
Right now.
Yep.
Just gotta wait.
Yeah, he thought.
But I always thought the objective was actually the far southern slope of Cemetery Ridge. That they were attacking at basically a 45-degree angle.
There was an attack there, and it was led by General Johnston. General Johnston actually penetrated Cemetery Ridge on that day. And William Satterwhite can actually explain this better. I wish I could get him on. They had more there that they could have penetrated that and drove through. And
they would have split the Union line the second.
They would have split the Union line on the second day, and with the attacks on Little Round Top, you would have basically surrounded half the Union Army right there and could have destroyed them.
Could have if they had done it right. If they had just moved troops away from the Round Tops down to Cemetery Ridge like that, if you had pushed the breakthrough, they had it. Union would have been forced to retreat because they would have split the Union line.
Whose division was that struck that section? Was it Anderson's division? It wasn't a part of Longstreet's corps. It was a part of A.P. Hill's corps on the second day.
Yeah.
That hit that position that Hancock had to basically scrap together a regiment and throw them into the fight.
The Minnesota boys come into play.
It may have been. Did I say Johnson? It may have been Anderson. Always get them confused. So it may have been Anderson that got in there and
because for a brief moment they did secure a section of Cemetery Ridge and penetrate it, but the remaining troops that were coming up the road, I forget what road that is. It wasn't the Chambersburg Pike. I forget which one it is. They're literally coming up the road and being deployed as the Confederate troops are banging into the ridge. The issue that I've always seen is I have to assume some of this was because Hood was wounded and taken from the field.
The exact same thing. And Hood got taken out at the beginning of the fight.
Yeah.
So then you had I forgot who took over, but Hood originally got taken out at at the beginning. And I forgot who took over. But he definitely got taken out.
Hood
I remember
was
correctly. Evander Law took over the division.
Do it now. Sorry. What did you say?
I said, if I remember correctly, Evander Law would have taken over the division. I believe.
Yeah.
Which I think is what screwed everything up because his brigade happened to be the one attacking Little Round Top.
The Falls division was already up there with Hood, so I don't know who you would have got to come in there.
No, what I'm saying is if you look at it on a map, I think Will has actually posted this before. Hood's division literally made almost like what would be a right turn with a car.
They were supposed to do, yes.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is if Hood is there, okay, and is still in command and is leading that attack, you would have to assume that once it is communicated by Anderson, whoever, even if it was communicated somehow through Longstreet that we've made a breach here, we've done something here, you would think somebody like Hood would have redirected the attack because most of the Army of Northern Virginia's corps and division commanders were excellent at
that time. You're already in the fight. You're not going to be able to go in there and start rearranging people.
No, not in the full blown of the fight. Let me pull something here. Pull my campaign atlas here, and I'll pull my atlas out. That'll tell us where it's going here. Campaign atlas is about as good as you're going to get.
I'm wrong, Chris. Not Hood's division. McLaws' division. McLaws' division is the one on the far left. That what I don't understand is at any moment, once you realize that there is some success taking place or a breach being made, McLaws was not wounded during the fight. why in the world did not McLaws do something to exploit the situation?
Well, you got to understand. I mean, what you're
Uh-huh.
looking at is you're in the fog of war. So,
Okay.
when you're in the fog of war, I mean, you're not seeing, you can't, you really don't know what is, taking place. And it's hard when it's like that to, um, get these people in.
Oh, let me see here now.
But just looking at the way they launched the attack, if I remember correctly, did or did not McLaws basically launch the attack brigade at a time?
Yes, it was supposed to be in echelon, but
Right. So if that's the case, at some point, if you have not launched your entire division, if it's communicated what's going on, you would think he would be able to at least redirect one brigade
yeah.
to support what's going on.
Well, I mean,
Because it's not like he sent them all in at once.
Right. But you got to think. So look, you're up there. You're in the thick of woods. You're being fired at. You don't know. You're trying to ascertain the situation of where the enemy force is at. They are behind a fortified position. You're getting fired at, and now you're trying to reorganize a brigade into a different spot. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, I got my atlas open now. Yeah, Hood was actually headed to the south of McLaws when is where his troops were.
Right. He was on the far, basically right of the Confederate
Yes.
line.
Yeah, they were going to come across.
McLaws' division was the closest to where the breach took place. I want to say it was the right side of Anderson's division that hit the far southern slopes of Cemetery Ridge. Barksdale basically single-handedly sent the entire Third Corps reeling.
Yes.
The only logical explanation, Chris, I can think of what happened in making Little Round Top such a focus is I want to say it was Law's brigade that was the closest to Little Round Top during the fight. Shane may be able to see that if he's looking at the troop distribution, but I want to say it was Law's brigade that was the closest when they were distributed.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah, if you go from right across the left, you had 48th Alabama, 44th Alabama, 15th Alabama, the 47th and 4th Alabamas, with Law with the 47th. That's all Hood's boys.
That's Law's brigade. That Alabama brigade is Law's brigade.
Yep, and then you had Robertson next to him with the 5th and 4th Texas, and the 1st Texas and the 3rd Arkansas. And then Anderson was behind that with the 8th, 9th, 11th, and 59th Georgia regiments.
Right. What I think, and I want to say Benning might have been running around in there too.
Yes, Benning was behind Hood.
Benning was involved in that.
Yes, he had the 15th, 20th, 17th, and 2nd Georgia regiments.
Right, Henry Benning.
Yes.
What I think probably took place.
Yeah, he was following Hood's brigades.
Right. The best answer I could think of to the question being posed in this conversation is this. Hood is wounded early on in the fight. According to what I read, and I've read this somewhere, Law was the next in command. He was the brigade commander that was the next in command. Okay? If the situation would have transferred over to Law's command.
Yes, it says here Law was near the 44th and 48th, and he's probably not learned yet that now he is the commander of Hood's division. Okay. So he hooked up with the 2 Texas regiments.
Right. So what happens is, this is what I'm thinking in my head. Law basically takes it upon himself that his brigade, they're going to take Little Round Top. Okay, yeah. Whatever. He basically, that attack begins with just him and 4 or 5 regiments doing whatever they're going to do.
Yeah, because originally his boys were chasing the Union sharpshooters up Big Round Top, and then he shifted to Little Round Top.
Correct. So think about it. At some point, he, as well as Robertson, as well as Benning, as well as the brigades behind him, are going to learn Hood is down and Law is in command. So if I'm those 2 brigade commanders and I learn that Hood is down and Law is in command, Wherever I see Law going, that's where I'm going. Think about it.
All right. Okay. Now, okay. One thing, Hood's down, but does Law know he's been made the commander yet?
At
Because
some
you're
point,
talking-
he would have to because he knows he's first senior, and you would. I mean,
Yeah, but it
Right.
took
at
him a
some
while
point,
to
he's going to
find
figure it
out.
out.
Wait a second. I understand that. But what I'm saying is the battle's going on. Hoods went down. Now you've got to go find a courier to go find Law and let him know he's in command. Now at that time, Law's got knows he's in command of these brigades. He's got to assess the situation on the ground and find out, assess the situation on the ground, find out what is going on and what his next move is going to be. You're going to have mass confusion going on at this point.
Yes.
Correct. And what is entirely possible is, the whole battle over there on the second day lasted what, 3.5 hours tops? Because they didn't even launch the attack till about 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
By
So
7:30, you're getting dark.
right. So let's say the battle lasts 3 to 4 hours. Okay. Let's say somewhere in the first hour, Hood is seriously wounded. Okay. Historically, his arm was almost blown off. Okay. So it may take every bit of a half hour or more for Law to find out about it. But what if the division commanders traditionally were going to be at the rear of the division. Okay. Law's brigade is at the front. They went in 2 by 2, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Law's brigade is at the front. Benning and Anderson are behind Robertson and Law. Okay. So if Hood goes down, it's entirely possible that Benning and Anderson knew that Hood was down, meaning Law's in command, but Law may not have known that yet.
No,
So-
he didn't.
What happens is, if I know Hood's down, Law's, like I said, Law's in command, I'm going to now centerpiece my movements on my division commander, even though he probably don't know he's my division commander right now.
Yeah, it says Law finally was somewhere near Devil's Den and is now told the Hood's down, but he is slow in assuming this role, and this initial Confederate attack on Meade's left flank develops into individual engagements and uncoordinated advances.
Correct. It basically became almost like a every brigade for itself type fight
Yes.
because
Yes,
Law
it
didn't have
did.
the ability to coordinate what the rest of the division was going to do.
No.
Right. It did. It became into a what you said,
Every brigade for itself.
Every brigade for itself. In that right there. There's no doubt about that. I mean, because there was so much confusion going on up there. You're talking about you're going uphill in woods, fighting against an entrenched enemy. Your commanders are down. You're taking heavy casualties. I mean, it's just, there's so many things that was working against them.
Now,
Yeah.
because you're looking at the Atlas, Shane, which
Yes.
brigades were on McLaws's right? In other words, which brigades of his was closest to Hood's division?
Back up here. So, and then you had Hood up there. So the next one closest to, I see Anderson, Benning, Robertson, and Law down here. The Texas boys were the closest to Law.
No, what I'm saying is, if you look at McLaws's division, which brigades of his were on the right-hand side of his attack? In other words, they were the closest to Hood's division. Probably near the wheat field.
All right, let me find
I
the.
don't know if they were near the wheat field.
Yeah, McLaws is clear over, still close to the Emmitsburg Road. As you had Benning, Anderson, and then McLaws was completely over on the left side. And
Okay.
The closest boys to McLaws would have been the Andersons.
Okay, so which brigade of McLaws's is the closest to Anderson's?
Close. just back up.
And while I'm asking that, I'm going to my office to grab some of my stuff because now I'm wondering this myself.
Yeah, that's why I go looking for this so much. See, McClellan is not giving me information here. Let's see, Carlton and Manley, Kershaw and McCarthy is what it's showing here, but I'm not
Because remember, McLaws had multiple brigade commanders killed or wounded as well. I know Barksdale was mortally wounded.
Barksdale got killed early in the fight. He went on horseback, and actually he wasn't killed. He survived for almost for the next day.
Yeah, he was shot on how many times, though? I want to say it was half a dozen times.
I don't think he was shot that many times. I could be wrong, but he took a shot directly into the chest, and I read the doctor that was attending to him, and Barksdale, when they was giving him water, the water would pour out his chest.
All right, I'm flipping pages now. Hold on. Day 2.
Anderson with the 8th and 9th Georgia.
Kershaw went in near the wheat field. I'm reading that now. Hold on.
Who was it that broke Cemetery Ridge? Was it Anderson?
Let's see.
Yeah, Anderson would have assaulted Cemetery Hill or Cemetery Ridge.
Guys, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.
All right, where is that? I might have to get my other book here.
Did you ever get subscribed, Tony?
Yeah, I think I did. Oh, man. Oh, I think I did a long time ago.
Yeah, because I was supposed to interview you on your whenever you read your book. Okay, so I'm trying to think now.
Claus has Kershaw, Manley, Carlton, and then Barksdale was beside. There we go. The closest one would have been the 2nd South Carolina under Kershaw.
That's Kershaw. Yep.
That's right, under Kershaw. Yeah.
So hold on, I got a better look now. All right.
Claus had the 8th South Carolina, the 3rd South Carolina, and then the 2nd was his furthest to the right.
Well, see, even if that attack they launched so late in the day, I mean, I know they came close to breaking it. I mean, if they go through, people say, "Oh, well, they had a chance to roll it up." Well, you had what was it, the 6th Corps that was waiting right behind them?
Yeah, by then, the 6th Corps was just arriving
And fresh.
Yeah.
I mean, so if they break that with whatever, because the Alabama boys were just about spent. I mean, they would crush them.
If you rush a full, the entire 6th Corps in there, they're going to get crushed.
Oh, they're going to get, I mean, they were going to get, I mean, because the Alabama boys
they're out of ammunition.
They're out of ammunition.
Water supplies are
They had
running
no
low.
water. They was exhausted. They'd been fighting all day, and you rush a fresh corps in there, they would have, annihilated them.
Yeah, they would have.
I'm looking at a map of it now. This is actually the book that I have. It's a collection I got. Y'all probably heard of it. It's the Civil War collection, bunch of silver books. They have all kind of stuff. It's pretty much every battle of the war. Looking at this map here, let's see. This map has it at 4 p.m. on July the 2nd. The 6th Corps is down the Baltimore Pike, but not on the battlefield yet.
Yeah.
I would imagine now what I'm looking at, what I find unique is I know they had interior roads and they had things done because the Taneytown Road basically runs right along Cemetery Ridge. My question would have been, even if by some chance that they're able to, whether Walford Sims, anybody, if they take these positions, if they do this, I think it just depends on what kind of panic it sends through the 2nd Corps, right there in that middle.
I don't think
Because
it does
Fifth
anything.
Corps,
They've got
the
to get
Fifth Corps had
troops.
just arrived as well, and
Right.
the
I
other
mean,
parts
that's
of
what
the 12th were
I was
also
saying.
had also
I'm
arrived
sorry.
by then.
That's what I was saying that Michael Phillips said. He said if the attack had been taking place in the morning, they're numerical superior. By the time this thing got underway, you're outnumbered by 25,000 troops. I don't care what they do. They may break it, they may roll it up, but then they're going to get like a tidal wave thrown back.
Yeah, because by then the entire Fifth Corps was in reserve. Wait,
Right.
and the
So
Sixth
you've
Corps was
got
almost there.
you've got 25,000 fresh troops that
Yeah,
are just waiting to be thrown into the fight.
yeah, because the 12th Corps was not yet engaged either at that point.
Right. I mean, and I know Meade was new to command. I mean,
Yeah,
if Meade commits those 25,000, those corps right there, he could have destroyed the army then.
yeah.
Now, see, I have now. Maybe my map is different than yours. I have at 5 p.m. on July the 2nd. The 12th Corps is at Culp's Hill.
Yes,
Okay,
but they were not engaged yet.
right. They hadn't engaged or done anything.
The
But-
Fifth
I don't
Corps
think they
was
did
also
do
up
anything
at that
until later that day.
But the thing about what you're talking about is the way that the federal lines were set up. You're only talking about 2 miles. It would not have taken them long to reach from Culp's Hill over
No.
to Cemetery Ridge. You're talking about a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
I think this is what, and I had this conversation with Michael Phelps a couple times.
They were almost 6 miles. They were 6 miles and around them. 6 miles versus 2 miles. Their interior, like Longstreet said in the movie, they had great interior lines. They could adjust troops in just a matter of minutes.
Right. It was basically Fredericksburg in reverse.
Yeah.
Which, if you've ever been to Fredericksburg battlefield, the roads that they constructed and the ability they had to move from the right wing to the left wing between Longstreet and Jackson was phenomenal. But I think, and I've had this conversation with Michael Phelps before, which he didn't like me that much, but that's okay.
Michael, that's just how Michael was. Michael liked people. He was just,
what I said was this. I acknowledge, and I always said this, I acknowledge the numerical superiority. Okay. And Shane, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but
Yeah, I can hear you.
I acknowledge the numerical superiority. Okay. What I look at is numerical superiority and the clock. Okay.
Okay.
So let's say when Longstreet launches this attack, okay, there's 3 to 4 hours of daylight left at best. All right. And some people will argue about the July and the solstice or whatever. Okay, I've lived on the East Coast all my life. July is July. Okay.
Yeah,
So
let's forget about daylight savings time. Let's just
So
Is
the
there a
point
way
is
to-
there's 3 to 4 hours of daylight left at best. If it
in
takes
July,
them,
well, if
is there a way to
daylight
share a
savings time-
picture in here, Chris?
Huh?
Is there a way to share a picture in here?
I don't know yet. There is, but it has to be done when I'm editing. I don't know if there is a way to show it while we're talking. I'll figure
probably
that out.
use your camera and flip it around.
I'll figure that out for you soon there.
Because what I was thinking is, let's say
I
for
have the
instance,
situation after 5 p.m. map up.
see, I don't have one that late in front of me. If let's say they take the position somehow, some way, I don't know, Chamberlain gets struck in the head with a musket ball early on. I don't know, something happens. If they take the position at some point, what I used to tell Mike is this: the numerical advantage is there, but you're only going to have about an hour of daylight to exploit it.
But
And that's what I've always said. It's not a matter of what kind of counterattack can you organize that quickly, that fast, okay, from corps that, as we said, are just arriving on the battlefield. So you're basically going to be launching brigade by brigade at that point.
You wouldn't have taken that many brigades. I mean, even if you're running out of daylight, you're still going to have dusty dawn that you can still put up a fight. I mean, I have to disagree with that. Numerical superiority is still going to play a huge factor.
Okay, let's think about it like this. even if it's numerical superior, how big was? Maybe somebody knows this. I don't know this. Does anybody know how big the 6th Corps was? Because I can flip over to a different book and I can tell you in about 5 minutes.
I don't know.
I'm
How big
thinking
it was.
12,000 is what I'm thinking.
Well, the cores were a lot were smaller, so yeah, it was probably
Yeah,
about,
Union Corps were not as big.
yeah. So you're probably right. I
6th
mean,
Corps, I got Sedgwick at 13,900, and that's including artillery, everything.
Yeah.
13,917. The 12th Corps under Slocum was less than 10,000 men. Here's the point I'm trying to make. Let's say we're talking about just the 6th Corps. That's 13,000 men. We know that the 2 attacks were launched, well, the 2 divisions went in at a combined close to 15,000 between LeMcLaws and Hood, because they were at full strength. All 8 brigades went in. Even if they suffer 30 to 40% casualties, which historically I know that they did, okay?
Yeah, they were about 50.
You're still looking at 7,000 to 8,000 men in a higher elevated position. Okay, I know they're tired. I know it's summertime. I know they're spent. I get that. But typically, as we've all talked about, Chris, you need a 3-to-1 advantage to take a higher elevated position. The 6th Corps would not have had that.
In most cases, I would agree with that. But when you've
There you
had
go.
a army, when you've had a force that's been fighting for 3 hours, that are exhausted, that have had no water and are almost out of ammunition, and the fight is out of them, I don't think you need a 3-to-1 advantage when you've got a fresh corps that's going to be running straight up the hill at them.
Now, the other question is that I used to ask Mike all the time, and he never would give me an answer. Do we really believe if Meade arrived on the battlefield on the night of July 1st, I believe. Do we really believe and do we really think that if he looks up from his position, which by the way, I want to say was probably a mile away, so he wouldn't have been able to see it perfectly, but Hancock would have been able to see it a little bit better. Do we really believe that if he sees the American flag streaming over the opposite slope of Little Round Top and the southern slope of Cemetery Ridge, and those troops withdrawing because they have been pushed from that position, do we really believe that George Meade is going to immediately say to himself, I got 60 minutes to launch the entire 6th Corps at that position? Is he really going to do that, or is he going to fall back to Pipe Creek?
I don't know what I think in a situation like that, speaking as a military man, a trained military man, your first reaction is going to be you're going to have to get to a position and rally your troops into to get your troops into, you can just have them all stream back. You're going to fall back to a further back position and readjust your lines and then make your assessment from there. There's not going to be some mass retreat back to Pipe Creek. The first thing he's going to do is get his men back, consolidate what he's got, and so he's got smaller supply lines, and then assess what he's going to do there. Because again, sunlight's running out. They're not going to be able to continue to push. Now, if the Confederates hold that hill now and Meade's sitting there, now Meade has, several options on his plate. Does Meade fall back to Pipe Creek? Because he's already outnumbered Lee. Lee already suffered 16,000 casualties. So there's no reason to think that Meade could not throw all of his forces the next day, the ones that had not been in the fight, and retake that position.
Sedgwick and the 6th Corps arrive around 6 o'clock.
Right. I mean, that's pushing it. That's an hour of daylight at best.
Yes.
Because I don't think that if Meade fell back to Pipe Creek, I don't think Lee's going to follow.
I don't think he is either.
I doubt it either.
Lee doesn't.
What's the casualty report, Chris? You may know this because you've always heard me say, even after historically what happens, if Lee goes back to Virginia on the night of July 2nd, that is not a Union victory. That's another Antietam best case scenario.
If Lee,
what is the casualty report at the end of July 2nd?
it was about Lee had lost I want to say Lee had lost about 16,000 men.
And what about the Union? Because they got blasted on day one.
I can't give you the exact number on the Union, but I believe they would be somewhere around what the same was on both days.
I know the Union lost about 25,000 for the entire battle, and
90% of that were the first 2 days.
yeah, and Lee lost 23,000 during the fight.
How many did you say Lee lost? I thought Lee lost. Lee had 70,000 men, and he left with. So you'd be right. That'd be about 23,000 men. And you said
he had about 37,000 effectives left at the end.
Who, Lee?
Yeah.
Right, but that figure is also based upon all of those that were captured and so on, because captured is a part of casualties. That figure is also based upon what happens between there and the Potomac River, too. Like, for instance, Pettigrew was included in that group, but Pettigrew didn't die until 2 weeks later.
Right. So I agree with you on this right here that had on the honestly, the first day was a Confederate victory. Second day, you could say it was a Union win. I wouldn't argue it. You could say it was a draw, and I wouldn't argue that either. It wasn't a Confederate win. But on second day, had Lee said declared victory and went home, then the perception is sometime reality. You would have had a lot of, in my opinion, Northern morale would have looked at it as, hey, they've just made an invasion, attacked our cities, and left, and they're showing that they can do this at will. I think you would have had some heat put on them.
Right, and see, that's why I say the first 2 days of Gettysburg, if Lee, and that's what always just irks my nerves, and that's where me and you always disagree, Chris. The only difference between Gettysburg and Antietam is Pickett's charge. That's the only difference from a casualty standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, from anything. Because technically speaking, Lee was not driven from the field. There was no massive counterattack by Meade. He was not driven from the field.
Well, Lee was not driven from the field at Gettysburg. Lee,
right, that's what I'm saying.
But there's two different things you're looking at, though. And it's totally different. At Antietam, Lee had around 39,000 men.
He's lucky that he wasn't crushed at Antietam.
Right. McClellan had 90,000 men.
Yeah, if McClellan hits him all one shot, he's done. He's dead.
At Gettysburg, Lee was the aggressor.
Well, we know technically the battles were different. I get that.
McClellan was the aggressor. If McClellan would have just made a coordinated attack, that war was done. Lee had his back.
Yeah, he waited too long. If McClellan makes a full-out assault about 9 o'clock, Lee's done for. Because at that point, Longstreet's not up yet.
Even throughout the day, McClellan's attacks were piecemeal, where he would attack position, and Lee was masterful. He would move troops from like they did almost at the Battle of the Bulge. He would move his troops to wherever the attack was at, and then you had Burnside hung up on the bridge. McClellan the war should have ended that day. McClellan should have crushed it. So to me, the battles of Gettysburg and Antietam are really not comparable in my opinion.
I'll be honest.
I'm talking about from a casualty standpoint. I'm not talking about tactics.
And I'll be honest too.
Not even still that. Both of them lost about 12,000 men. Okay, Lee had 39,000 men. McClellan had 90,000. So look at the percentages on that.
Yeah.
I mean, Lee lost, more of a third of his army. McClellan didn't even lose, barely 10%. And then
Union casualties at Antietam were more than 12,000, but I could be wrong.
No, they were 25,000 total, and both armies was right at 12,500 people. And another thing that McClellan didn't even use half of his forces.
No, he didn't.
If McClellan had thrown everything he had in there, and then the biggest thing is like I said, McClellan didn't even use half his forces. McClellan didn't even pursue. If he would have pursued, that's over then. He would have caught Lee and destroyed him.
Yeah, because Lee had spread his boys out piecemeal by quarters. He
And,
in three
and
different
like I said,
sections.
Half of McClellan's army hadn't even been used. I mean, he had fresh corps that he could have gave pursuit. So I mean, to me, Antietam and Gettysburg are just no offense on it, but they're just not comparable to me.
The reason I'm talking about I'm not talking about from a tactical or strategic standpoint. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is how they are viewed conceptually. People, many of them, the only reason they look at Antietam as a Northern victory is because, quote unquote, the Army of Northern Virginia went to Northern soil and they were turned back. Okay? But as you just so accurately stated, there was an opportunity for an all-out win, but McClellan, for whatever reason, was unable to do it. Whether it be,
I've only heard a few people, make that claim. I mean, I've always heard, if anything, it was a tactical victory by Lee and a strategic win by McClellan. Lee,
really, it was a draw.
And I agree with that right there too. But tactically, Lee won the battle because he should have been destroyed.
and he was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strategically, I'll give you the credit. I'll go ahead and say McClellan won it strategically because it allowed for the Emancipation Proclamation. But I'm more to say it's a tactical victory by Lee, but a draw overall because in all likelihood, Lee should have been destroyed. His entire army there's no reason Lee's army should have made it out of Antietam.
Yeah. Well, there are people, I'm not one of them by no means, but there are people that will say there's no reason that Lee should have made it out of Pennsylvania. Abraham Lincoln was one of them. So,
well,
I agree.
But here's another thing though that he's wrong on. Meade suffered 30% casualties. Okay. Now you just had a battle like that. You're beat up. You've got now 30,000 casualties like there that you've got to get. Now you've got to organize your army to go pursue Bobby Lee. Now you're new to command, and here you are. You're pursuing Robert E. Lee, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, "I'm chasing Robert E. Lee, and the first mistake I make, he's going to chop my legs off."
correct. Now, is it possible? I know this sounds crazy, Chris, but is it possible that somewhere in his mind, McClellan was thinking the same thing the day after Antietam?
No, I think that McClellan thought that not that he was because he knew how bad he had it out. I think McClellan's ego was so big. McClellan thought that he had won this massive victory and by turning him back. That's what I think McClellan had in his mind because he wrote his wife about this major victory that he had just won on Northern soil.
Which actually wasn't. And that brings me back to what I was saying. The reason I compared the two, what normally makes people call Sharpsburg a draw is the casualty numbers. That's normal because they're literally so similar and so almost the same. A lot of people say, well, tactically he won, strategically he won. The casualties are almost the same, and that's why a lot of people refer to it as a draw. What I was saying concerning Gettysburg, if the battle ends on July the 2nd, if Longstreet basically somehow, if we just basically take the movie Gettysburg and remix it, and he convinces Lee, basically, we can't agree on what to do. Lee wants to attack the center. I want to attack the right flank. We only have enough artillery left for one good major. Let's just pack it up and go home. If they pack it up and go home at that point, they've actually inflicted, I know you're going to talk about percentages because you and Will are cut from the same brain, but if they've literally inflicted more casualties than they've suffered, in other words, they've gave as good as they got, all right, then the argument could be made from a casualty standpoint at least that the first 2 days of Gettysburg are very similar to Antietam. It's a tactical victory for one person, a strategic victory for Meade probably because he turned back the invasion, but Meade has suffered serious casualties.
I will agree. I would not dispute the fact that had on the second day, they actually thought that Lee was going to go home. I will not dispute that had on the second day, because, like I said, the second day you could say Meade won. You could say it a draw, and I wouldn't argue it either way. I mean, because there was heavy casualties. No, Lee did not get his objectives, but either way, had Lee packed it up and went home, and with all of his forage, he'd inflicted casualties, and somebody said that Lee tactically won the battle. I wouldn't totally disagree with you on that. If they had said it was a complete draw, then I would not disagree with somebody on that either. But the things that in those days that decided when they said that made the thing a victory, casualties was one. Was one. I got to remember all of them now. Who inflicted the most casualties? Who held the ground? And who commanded the field? And I can't even remember all of them now. But one of the biggest, one of the biggest things that was who they decided that won the battle was who commanded the field. And still, after the second day,
Meade did.
Well, Lisa, so did Lee. Lee had not been driven off Seminary Ridge.
Right. And Chris, you're making my point right now. Don't make my point too much, because you remember the post that I had the other day with about 200 and some comments on it. Don't make my point. Lee was not driven from the field in Pennsylvania. Lee left voluntarily.
Right, just like he did at Antietam. But Lee could have been driven off the field had McClellan had Meade made an attack.
That's that. And I'm curious to hear somebody other than me and Chris on this. At Sharpsburg, I give you that 100% because it was a 3-1 advantage. McClellan could have easily put, but let's not forget.
Meade had entire corps he had not even used yet. And not only that, they had already called up, and I know they're not top-ranked soldiers, but they could have got there. They had 100,000 militia that was on the way.
So you really think if he turns around on the morning of July the 4th and launches an attack against Seminary Ridge that he drives the Army of Northern Virginia from that position?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, man. Chris, you better no longer post any memes with General Lee ever.
I don't think there's any doubt that he would have driven them from Seminary Ridge. First of all, to my knowledge, they was not even digging. They was not even dug in Seminary Ridge. The Confederacy also was completely out of ammunition as far as artillery. They had They only had 5 to 10% of their artillery shells left, so they had no artillery to fire at a Union attack. So
first of all, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just based upon terrain and the situation. We're not talking about what me and you both know today is that they were low on ammunition. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just based upon numbers, terrain, and the situation as it was, the number of casualties both units had suffered. I'm aware that the 6th Corps and the 12th Corps, for the most part, were not engaged. I get all that.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because he's still out. He vastly outnumbered him. Lee had no artillery, and Lee's army had been chewed up. I don't think there's any doubt that he would have driven him off.
Okay, so
Lee was not even dug in on Seminary Ridge.
Okay, just to pose the question. In order for him to do this, let's look at number one, the 3rd Corps is not making an attack. Number 2, the 2nd Corps is not making an attack because Pickett just ran headlong into him the day before. The 1st Corps is not making an attack because they're still shot up from July the 1st. The 11th Corps is not making an attack because they're also shot up from July the 1st. So out of the 7 Corps that's there, you only have 3. The 5th, which was engaged somewhat on July the 2nd, the 6th, and the 12th. That's all you have. Now, this is the part, Chris, that I don't think you're thinking about that you should have because you're better at this than I am normally. In order to do this, he has to attack in 2 different directions because if he just attacks Seminary Ridge, Ewell is not just going to sit there and watch.
Okay, you're right. But there's also troops on Culp's Hill.
But the troops on Culp's Hill is the 12th Corps. He has to pull them off to have fresh troops to attack Seminary Ridge.
Right.
So you take Edward Allegheny Johnson is sitting on top of Culp's Hill on July the 4th going, hey, because you just vacated a high position on your rear.
Okay, he vacates that high position. Okay, what do you think he's going to do? Do you think he's going to follow him? Do you think he's going to try to go launch his own attack there, or do you think he's going to try to pull back onto Seminary Ridge?
I think
That's what I'm saying. He can't.
The attack should have happened the third right as Pickett's charge ended because
You're
on the
exactly
left side,
right.
the left
You
side of the
are
Union
100%.
line, which was the right side of the Confederate line, there was no cavalry out there, and they only had about 5,000 to 7,000 troops that were actually worn out on that left side. If they slam two corps into that, they turned Lee's, they turned the Lee's side of the army there, basically getting behind Lee and crush him.
And what did Longstreet say in the movie? He said, "If I move all my people forward," he said, "we won't have a flank at all."
They'll swing around and crush us. Right. Now, didn't they launch a demonstration attack on the right side of the Confederate line that day?
On the night of July 3rd, there was another minor skirmish that took place on Little Round Top, and
right,
and it was like at midnight, and I think there was another minor skirmish that took place on Culp's Hill. But as far as a full fight, no. Shane is exactly right. As soon as the Confederate troops had been walking back to the lines, they should have came out with everything they had and destroyed them right then.
Because if you come off, once you get clear of Little Round Top, that area is absolutely perfect for a full-out assault of Lee's right side of the line, which, like I said, only had about 5,000 to 7,000. So you're going to probably have, almost a 3-to-1 superiority coming off that side.
But
those troops are exhausted.
What I'm talking about is too when Armistead busted the line, with his 300 or 400 troops, and you've already got all these casualties, half the casualties, and they're trying to make it back to the line, and you've already got, I forgot which unit that had, that they threw in that was fresh. As soon as they're going back, if you throw everything you got at those retreating troops, you destroy the entire army there. It's over.
Yeah. Once you push that left side of the army in, you're going to swing around behind Lee. Lee's trapped, and done for.
The troops that are retreating from Cemetery Ridge are going to be destroyed when you launch that.
Yeah.
When I was in college, Chris, one of my professors, we were talking about the third day, and one of the things that he said, that I've always kind of felt was accurate. I just don't know if the movie completely did it justice. The first thing the movie does is make it basically seem like that Pickett's charge was very much a surprise event to the Federal Army.
It was.
They did not expect it. Which I believe that. And if you look at the troop distribution and things of that nature, I could see that. I could see Meade not thinking they're coming again on the third day.
But Meade had told the guys, who was in control of the Union Center, the night of July the 2nd when they met, Meade's like, if they attack, they're going to hit our center the next day.
He said, if they attack.
Right.
He was not. I don't believe that he was 100% sure that Lee was going to make another assault.
Yeah,
because
especially
if they do, they're going to hit the center.
But with Meade's experience, because he was an experienced commander.
And he was a very capable commander.
He was probably the first army commander that the Army of the Potomac had that had actually served a long period of time during the war, with exception to maybe Hooker. So he was familiar, and the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia launching direct frontal assaults, with the exception of the Peninsula Campaign, is not something that you saw on a regular basis. They were a flank attack army. So I could see the concept amongst Hancock and them going, okay, if they do it, they'll do it here, but I don't know if they're going to do it. What I was going to say is one of the things that my professor said when I was in college that made sense when he said it. He goes, the only thing that explains the no counterattack from the Union forces is one of two things, or a combination of both. Number one, they were so spent and shot up their daggone self, they weren't able to. Or, and this is something, Chris, that me and you've never talked about, but he said it when I was in college, and I thought it was interesting. He said either that or the breach at the angle on Cemetery Ridge was maybe a little bit more than what Hollywood displays. And because of that, troops could have possibly in that moment been being moved from the flanks. So even though that breach was shored up and solidified within a matter of maybe 30 to 40 minutes, if decisions were made to bring troops from the flanks, then you have to turn around and send them back to the flanks before you launch them on an attack. So if you're Meade and your headquarters gets hit with a few cannonballs and you're seeing the high watermark hit you in the face, Hancock is down. If you send a courier and make a decision to begin to move maybe elements of the 12th or the 6th Corps from their position on the flanks to support the center breach, even though they weren't necessarily needed, if that order was given, now you're not really able to order them to spring onto the flanks because they're going to have to turn around and head back the other way.
Well, first of all, I don't
Hey,
think
Tony.
it took, first of all,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Shane.
From what Meade's report says, orders were sent out as the charge ended to get the 6th Corps moving, but the problem was they were so spread out and it took time to get them into a coordinated attack formation. By the time it got together, it was almost nightfall.
Yeah, I don't think it took 30 or 40 minutes to get troops to the angle. I mean, like Longstreet said, they got good interior lines. They can shift
No,
troops
Chris,
in
that's
just
not
a
what I
matter of
mean. What I
minutes.
meant was, does it take, let's say it took 30 or 40 minutes to, in other words, completely stop the attack. I don't know at what point that Armistead fell, but let's say it took 30 minutes to stop them once they broke the angle.
No, I think that once they broke the angle, it 4 or 5 minutes, it was done. I mean, you're talking about maybe 250 or 300 soldiers broke the angle.
Is that thermal?
I mean, maybe 200, maybe 200 or 300 troops. It was not I think by the time they broke the angle within 10 minutes, it was over.
I don't know enough about historically when the angle broke or what some of the reports say, because
I
the
mean,
only reports you're going to get are Union reports anyway.
Yeah, Hancock was down too, which was his head commander who would have.
You think the troops that broke the angle, it was not like a division. It was not like
Yeah, it was
Armistead.
only a few hundred.
You had a couple hundred troops from a Tennessee unit, a couple hundred troops from a North Carolina
right
unit.
in front of Cushing's guns, but that was closed off really, really rapidly within 3 minutes. It was done.
Yeah, you had these troops were just a mixed match of different soldiers. Yeah. It was not like a full brigade.
They just quickly moved guys down the line quick as commanders saw the break start to happen. They moved those other brigades, down the line within a couple minutes. It was finished.
Yeah, I mean, and you may agree with me, Shane. I mean, I think by the time when they broke the line, within 10 minutes, 5 minutes, it was over.
Yeah, it was.
That brought them up, and I just and I think one thing could have come to it. Think about it. Really, in all actuality, Lee had never been defeated before. And I think that some of this they were so jubilated that they had just beat the hell out of the Army of Northern Virginia. That maybe the attack was not really on a lot of the commanders' mind, except for somebody like Meade who gave that order.
The order was given, but the problem too, Hancock was down.
Right.
Who would have been the guy to lead that assault?
Sure.
So it took way too long to get everything together.
I mean,
Hancock's down. Reynolds is dead. So the two guys that would have led that,
Like,
counter
who
assault.
made that?
Yeah.
And you've got Hancock's down, Reynolds dead. Who is there's two brigade commanders that slip in my mind right now that I can't think of. That's
Kemper is down. Garnett is blown to
I'm not
oblivion.
I'm not talking about on the Confederate side. I'm talking about on the northern side.
Webb,
Well,
Gibbon.
yes.
They may have been division commanders though. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, division brigade. I mean, general
Webb-
officer to me.
Webb was right there at the, Webb was one of the guys that helped close that gap there at Cushing's guns. He was the next one down the line. There's Webb, and there was another guy there. I forget his name. They quick moved their brigades down real quick and basically finished off the assault.
I'll tell you because I know it's Gibbon. I want to say Humphreys, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
I've got a
It comes to Corps Commander Sedgwick didn't have a whole lot of experience at that
right.
point.
None.
And you got subscribed to the channel, didn't you, Shane?
Yeah.
I've got a good one for y'all tomorrow night. I'm not gonna let you in on it, but y'all are gonna enjoy this one. This is gonna be fun. I've enjoyed this right here. I think if we keep this going and we can start having some really good stuff in this and some good discussions and pick up
if
some.
you keep putting the word "whipped" and Army of Northern Virginia in the same sentence, I'm gonna unsubscribe from the channel.
Well, I'm sorry, Tony. I know in your delusional mind that you are trying to find a way for the Army or for Virginia to win and become an independent nation, but
Did
it's
you
not
just
gonna
say
happen.
my delusional mind?
Yes, because I know in your delusional mind that you somehow have developed this thing that Virginia has won and became an independent nation, but that's fine. But unfortunately, as much as I love Lee, and everybody knows how much I love Lee, the Army of Northern Virginia got whipped at Gettysburg.
Yeah, this is the first time they had actually ever been stopped and stood up.
And I mean, not only stopped, that was the first time they got straight up whipped. I mean,
see, you always gotta say straight up whipped. Like what?
They
literally gave as good as they got.
Tony, they got straight up whipped, buddy. I mean, they didn't give. I mean, day one they did fine. They got whipped. I mean, just admit it.
Third day was a crushing blow as far as.
First of all, the third day was bullcrap. We all know the third day was crushing blow. We know that. That was the dumbest attack. Should have never happened. Being from Virginia, I wear it with a badge of honor because those guys had balls, God knows. But
make a point right here. One of my football analogies. As much as I love the Alabama Crimson Tide, in a couple of years ago against Clemson, they got straight up whipped. Okay, it happens. And unfortunately, in that battle,
they got beat by 40 points.
Right.
The Confederate Army at Gettysburg didn't get beat by 40 points. The casualties were literally within 5,000 of each other.
They're
lucky.
Lee went with 70,000 men, and he left with 37,000 affected. That's half his army.
Here we go with the percentages. You understand percentage is not, like I told Will yesterday, percentage is not an accurate statistic when your baseline is not the same. If Meade would have had 70,000 men and Lee would have had 70,000 men, then it's an even baseline. Or if Lee marched up there with 100,000 men, then it's an even baseline.
They didn't have 70,000 men each.
That's what I'm saying. So when you say percentage, you say, well, you lost 40% of your army and you lost 25% of your army, but we lost the same number of people.
Yeah.
But when you're outnumbered 20,000 people, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, troops that Lee couldn't afford to lose at that point of the war either.
Right. I mean, yeah, you lost a third of your army. I lost a third of my army. You had 100,000 men. I've got 60,000 men. Okay. So now you still have 66,000 men left. I'm down to 40. I mean, it does matter. Percentages does matter.
It took the offensive part of the Northern Army of Virginia completely out of play because at that point
they
Lee
had
didn't
one
have the men.
last offensive battle, and the Battle of the Wilderness was called Lee's
Yep.
last great offensive battle.
Yep.
But after that, they never had the
Won, by
ability.
the way.
Yeah, they took the sting out for a full year, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I'll give credit where credit's due. And I mean, Lee had many great victories. You know, I get, and I'm the first one that will, you'll hear me say, I get mad or get tired of when people say a Pyrrhic victory. Okay. A Pyrrhic victory is just some word to try to discredit somebody. When you inflict casualties and you roll and you send them back up against the river, you know, a victory is a victory.
There's another
But-
one. Lee should have been crushed at the river. You know, even if you don't fully assault it, you line guns up along there. All you got to do is lay 150, cannons down on top of Lee and his men, who are trapped against the river. He's done for.
They weren't actually trapped, though. If you
Yes, they
and
were.
I've
His
watched a
back
whole
was
video on
against
the concept of
river-
Williamsport. They had dug
Yeah.
in at Williamsport.
His back was
Yeah, but the
against
river was way too high for him to cross.
or he would.
If Meade
You're
follows
exactly
straight
right.
on, if Meade
Yeah,
follows straight on, they're in trouble.
yes, because if he would have got the hell out of there if he was not trapped at the river. If it had not been for a tenacious rear guard action put up by Pettigrew, he might have still very well caught him.
Yeah, because
So why
Buford.
didn't Meade attack him?
Buford
Why didn't
was-
Meade attack him at Williamsport when he was sitting right there staring him in the face? Why didn't Meade attack him?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him that.
Because maybe he felt the position was impregnable, the same way Lee probably should have felt a couple days prior.
He could have, and he could have
Well,
made a very
if-
good decision on it.
If Meade follows straight on, before they get the defenses set up, yes, it probably happens. But Meade didn't, which gave Lee time to actually get he had more guys and more guns coming up, and the ammo that he needed to refill were coming as he was starting to near the river. All that stuff was coming across for him to build that defensive position. So it sort of gave Meade not following gave Lee that time.
Well, I've said 100 times, Chris knows this. The Pennsylvania campaign overall was a bad idea.
Yeah,
And-
you're right.
I've said that 100 times. Now, do I understand some of why it was done? Sure. Which is why I also say that the campaign was not a complete 110% disaster, more like a 90% disaster. But
Yeah,
Um,
they had food
I
for
will
what?
say, I will say this right here. I think that the Pennsylvania campaign was a necessary, or even Maryland or someplace else. It was a very necessary something that they had to do. I
Yeah,
think
'cause they
it
needed
was.
the food and
I
supplies.
think it was. I think it was executed very poorly. That
Yeah.
they had their men way spread out, and they really had no objective other than to draw the Northern Army out and try to declare a victory.
And then to
So
drawn
I
into
think-
battle the way they were should ever happen.
they need that. I do think that it was a 110% complete disaster. Those are my 3 takes on it.
I mean,
if he'd have
they
stayed,
got
if
food and
if Lee
supplies
would've
for
stayed
1
in
year,
Virginia,
But
if
food
they
and
would've stayed in
supplies are not
Virginia.
going to win war.
but then
if-
they had what 100 and something cattle and sheep, down the going down the river for days after because they drowned going across. So really they lost that's how much more food they lost that shouldn't have happened.
historically they sent thousands of head back to Richmond.
Yeah, they
But I
did.
mean,
There should've
that's
been
not
more.
going to win you a war.
Yeah.
The thing I want to point out about Virginia, I mean,
You gotta
maybe,
eat though, Chris.
Hindsight's 2020. We can all sit here and say, play armchair general, and that's what's fun about this. They were going to come back, and when I've said this, and I've said it many times about being behind on the cards. Lee himself may not have been behind on the cards, but Lee realized that the whole war effort, they were behind on the cards, and they needed a knockout punch, and he was not going to get that. I mean, he possibly could have got it in Virginia, but he needed to score that knockout punch or that devastating punch on Northern soil to take away their will to fight.
And he didn't expect the change in Union command either.
No, he thought he was still going to be facing Hooker.
Well, if
you know,
He found out he was against Meade. He knew he all of a sudden had a real opponent against him.
right.
Well,
And,
Chris, the only part of what you just said that I don't 100% agree with is I think the number one way to take away their will to fight, he was already doing a good job of. You send enough New Yorkers and Philadelphians home in body bags, you're taking away the will to fight. Where
he
you're
couldn't
doing
have
it
went
at
to
does not
Philadelphia.
necessarily.
Right, he couldn't have went that far because the bridges has already been burned at Wrightsville.
No, that's
And
not what
they-
I'm saying. I'm talking about just in general. For
They
2.5
were
years, he had been
not-
sending Union soldiers home dead. That's what I'm
Right.
talking about.
But
So
they're
whether
really not-
you're killing them 20 miles north of Richmond or whether you're killing them in Pennsylvania, don't matter.
Yes,
He'd
it
been
does.
sending them home dead for 2 years.
Yes, it does. That's big. If
The
when
fact
you're
that he kept
thinking,
sending them back
that-
across the Potomac was bad enough.
that's bad. But when you're coming on your home territory and you're killing them there, that's a whole lot different psychological beast.
Well, in that regard, watch Shane. Chris is gonna get me on this. Watch. Well, in that regard, win, lose, or draw, he killed 20-some thousand of them in Pennsylvania.
But he lost the battle.
But do you at least understand what I'm trying to say? He had
No, I
killed
know.
thousands
If he
of them
had-
from
look,
61 to
look,
63. Where he was doing it at didn't matter.
If he had went up there in Pennsylvania and he had killed 30,000 of them, and he had routed them like at Chancellorsville, where they ran back to the defenses of Washington, and and Lee finally said, "Okay, I can't track this. I can't break this. We're going to go up here, raid this other whatever, and then we're going home." And he comes home after inflicting that kind of damage. That's a different situation. Okay.
Okay. You're right. When we always say
Okay.
killed 30,000, the reality is they suffered 20-some thousand casualties, but less than 4,000 were dead.
Right.
We
right. I
always
mean,
say that, but
yeah,
and it's just a language that we use. But
yes, casualties still casualties.
right,
Yeah, it took a full
They
year
were
for
not
all those guys to
losing
make it back to the
will,
line.
But I'm saying you had to win a major victory up there for them to say, we don't want this war to continue on our soil. If they can come up here and win a battle like this, what's going to stop them coming back in 6 months later and winning another one and then another one? They did not want, and that could have. That's the point that I'm making there. It's
I
different.
guess
Still
the
did.
difference
You
in
still
me
had to
and
raise
some
on
people-
Chambersburg and crap free, and
It's-
from 64 and 5.
Do it
Shane,
now.
I'm as pro South as it gets, and I'm a big fan of General Lee, and I'm a big fan of General Longstreet as well. So
I'm not.
some people don't like him, but I'm a pretty big fan of his. I'm not. I like Jackson more than I like him, but
Yeah.
I
Another point.
will
If
say
Jackson's
this.
at Gettysburg, I think this is a different fight.
I don't know.
Wait.
Absolutely not, because unless they kept the two corps together, there's no way that Ewell could have taken that hill. Ewell had 17,000 men and was staring down the barrel of 30 guns. It would have been a complete slaughter.
Oh, that it was.
No,
Now,
I-
the only way it could have happened is
I don't
if
think
they
he
had
was-
brought AP Hill over to fight this, but we went way off on our topic because we're on our Gettysburg discussion, and I don't want to blow everything because we got that coming up in a few days.
What I was gonna say is I like all of them, but this is what I think. I think that it was almost, I'm not gonna say completely impossible, but almost impossible. I don't even know if a win at Gettysburg ends the war. And I say that
I think
because
if you crush, let's just say, for some
Let's say
great
you have a
reason,
battle like at
destroys
Chickamauga.
2/3 of the Union Army, I think now you got a problem.
Let's say you have a victory, a Chickamauga-like victory, where you split half the army and they're retreating to Washington, and the other half are being held there. And let's say George Thomas or whoever, or George, couldn't hold them, and they're destroyed. Now you've got a major problem.
the reason I said that though, Chris, and this is why. If the difference between Chickamauga-ish and this is Meade had a defensive line that he would have fallen back to because that was his original strategy. And we all know this, okay? So let's say everything goes perfect on July 2nd. General Hood is not wounded. He rides to the top of Little Round Top. He's swinging his hat around. The 1st Texas boys everything goes perfect. and they somehow, some way flank the position. They get a battery up there by dark, quoting the movie, and everything goes perfect, and they drive the enemy from the field. They inflict about 20 to 25,000 casualties. Let's say everything goes perfect. To me, as crushing of defeat that may have been, and Lincoln would have been beating his head against the wall, all Meade's going to do is retreat, 10, 12 miles or so, and be at his defensive position at Pipe Creek. And Lee is not going to attack that.
That's what I was just going to say. Lee is not going to go attack Pipes Creek. But I want to show you some map 1x2. If you look at this, there are roads on either side that are going to bring entire corps right down on the flank of Pipe Creek. We'll do that. But guys, we'll be going for an hour and a half. I'm going to let y'all say y'all's final words, and I'll get ready to put our next one. I'll get ready to edit this and put it up. Tony, final statement.
This is fun. I enjoy it.
Okay. Let's keep this going.
Talking about Little Round Top, we'll be talking about Gettysburg. But I think the biggest thing to remember about Little Round Top and about Gettysburg is Hood was wounded severely early in the fight. And there's no doubt in my mind that affected the strategic situation around and below Little Round Top that day. And if Hood had not been wounded, things may have turned out a little bit different.
Okay. Shane, final comment?
I think I agree there too, and also the fact that Sickles, having his men moved so far out too, really threw the entire Confederate strategy completely off. That had he been back where he was supposed to, who knows?
Okay. My final statement is I really enjoyed this. I think that we've got something here that we can really build on. I want you guys to, I'm going to start, posting this and stuff. I want you guys to put your suggestions on something you would like to talk about and have discussions on, and we'll try to have something like this once or twice a week.
Cool deal.
All right, guys. Thanks.
I'm working on something. I'm working on something good here. Once I get, got to find my OR disc, but the research I'm working on, and Tony, you'll like this one. I'm actually working on the research, which is hard to find on. You're going to try to prove that Lee's medical issues actually caused the issues at Gettysburg, where he wasn't thinking straight.
Yeah,
people have said for years that he was suffering from health issues during that term of the war.
Well, and he could have very well had a heart attack. I'd like to read that, and we'll make that for discussion one night.
Yeah,
I
just got to find my ORs.
And thanks, guys, for y'all hanging out for this, because we've been on for an hour and a half. But I'm going to come up, with a good one, and I'll look forward to us having this conversation again.
Yeah, catch you soon, guys.
All right, guys.
Bye.